Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your client's peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. I'm your guest host, Diane Robinson, investment advisor with IP Financial Advisory Services, LLC. Today, I'm happy to introduce my guest, attorney Shannon Pawley. She's an estate planner with the Estate and Asset Protection Law Firm. And Shannon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today. I know I'm really excited to not only be on your podcast, but also share some of the information we talked about in our pre-preparation for today's podcast.
Well, I want to tell everyone that I invited you because occasionally when I have time, I will go listen to other people's podcasts. And you have some of the best podcasts that I have listened to. You talk to people, you don't talk down to them. You talk at a level that everyone should be able to understand. And that's the reason I wanted you on today.
Thank you so much. So kind.
So let's start. You have a podcast that's called The CEO of what?
Becoming the CEO of your parents' life.
I love that title.
Thank you. And I know that's one of the ones that myself and my former law partner, one of the things that used to drive both of us absolutely insane, almost like nails down a chalkboard, is when we'd be working with families and we had a pre-existing client. Now they're transitioning in their life and health needs. And we have their families stepping up as caregivers. And what we started to realize is the importance of having a proper mindset going into it as a caregiver. Because so often we would hear, quote, "I'm becoming the parent of my parent," end quote. And that would always cause shivers down my spine because that is, at least to me, very disrespectful of the relationship that you have with your parent. And it is actually minimalizing not only the importance of the position you're filling, but exactly what that role is entailing. Because when you're having a parent of a parent, when you think of a parent, you're thinking of a parent-child relationship. You're thinking of one that is nurturing, developing, and preparing for their next step of independence is usually how you think of that. And very often, these persons that are serving as caregivers, especially in our current generations that are stepping up, are the sandwich generation, which is, once again, that's where we're dealing with people that not only have children of their own that they're raising, but now they have their parents that they're caregiving for. So it's basically a 3-generational home. And being a caregiver, just like as being a parent caregiver, it is a position of love. It is a position of honor to be able to have and participate in. And it's one that, just like new parents, they have to have that right mindset so they don't have that exhaustion and that improper focus and development. Kind of the same thing with your caregivers of your adult parents as they age.
And I'm sure everybody knows that women are the ones who are the primary caregivers of the parents. And I just read the statistic on it. I want to say it's like 60 or 70% of daughters are the ones who are the caregivers. So that's a big burden on them. So what advice would you give to, let's say my mother's dead, but just say my mother was still living and I'm trying to prepare for what happens in the future if something happens to her and she can't take care of herself. So what piece of advice would you give me?
I want you to think of your mom as being the company Apple. And Apple, it's not one person that's taking on all of that burden. It's not one person's expertise that is giving all of the benefit to that entity known as Apple. Instead, you're dealing with a multitude of experiences, a multitude of professionals, a multitude of benefit from different avenues. So I often encourage people to think of yourself as the CEO of the entity that is your parent. And if we're talking about a CEO, what does the CEO focus on? Well, number one, they're going to have a board of directors usually. And these are professionals that bring a certain insight to the overall entity of the corporation or parent. This is going to be your financial advisors, your insurance advisors, your tax advisors, you're going to have them as part of your board of directors for success of the corporation that is mom or dad. Then you got to sit down and actually approach the caregiving like a CEO would of a Fortune 100 company, right down to something as simple as creating a mission statement. I know this sounds silly, but if you can create your vision, you can create your core goals, your core rules, your budget, your business plan, it's astounding how much clearer the role is and how much more productive you'll be in it. So, I mean, you can start out with a mission statement. It could be something as simple as it's our mission to ensure that the best quality of life of mom is given for her and as well as for me as the caregiver. Perhaps that's your mission statement of that company that is mom. And then you got to figure out what your core values are. As you're sitting down, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So what's the responsibility of the parent? Because I know that I work with 5 wishes, and 5 wishes, you can sit down and tell your loved ones how you want to be treated. Do you want to be kept alive just for the sake of being kept alive?
Oh, 100%.
You know, how do you want to be treated when you're incapacitated and someone else is making your decisions for you? So what advice do you have in that direction?
So when you're going down that direction, you need to have the legal advice to make sure that you have proper legal standing to ensure not only, this is me speaking on behalf of the parent as counsel here, we got to make sure that the parent names out the right players. That's one of the most important things here is you got to name out the right players. You don't have to be fair when you're naming out people to serve. What do I mean by that? Quite often, I have parents that have 2 children. They have CEO Cindy. My gosh, she was top of her class in Harvard. She got her MBA. She's working at a Fortune 500 company. She's got a multitude of investments she's already done by age 35. She is that epitome of the perfect child. And very often when you have that epitome of the perfect child, that child's sibling, we're going to say is Gambling Gary. Well, guess what about Gambling Gary? If Gambling Gary has 2 nickels he can rub together, what do you think he's going to do? He's going to go down to the tracks and bet it on the ponies. Well, now the parents are coming to me saying, let's get these documents together. So not only am I making sure these documents are stating their wishes and making sure it's given the proper powers to their agents, now all of a sudden they go, well, we want that financial power of attorney and the trustee. Oh, that's definitely going to be CEO Cindy. But I do really I got to be fair. So I guess that I'm going to name Gambling Gary as my healthcare advocates. And I very often have to have some hard conversations with the parents if that's the right person. Because just as it's important to have the right attorney to draft these documents for you, you have to have the right team to be implementing them for you. And at the same time of having the right team, you have to have proper communication and proper, I'm going to use the word, going back to the whole business idea, you got to have a good onboarding plan for your agents. Not only during your lifetime that you have these communications with them, especially when we're talking about end of life plans, but also they have a better understanding of exactly how they are best going to serve you and your goals and your needs. Because one of the things I emphasize to people, especially to family members, when I'm drafting these documents so they can properly serve in their role as a caregiver, whether they're handling financial issues or healthcare issues, is that the agent, the child, their duty is not to do what is in the best interest of mom or dad. Their duty is a duty of obedience. And that means even if what mom or dad is stating in their documents is completely contrary to your personal views, let's say that you are of the position that passive euthanasia, meaning basically not doing anything to prolong the life, but stopping some of the life-sustaining, such as hydration, nutrition, etc. You might believe personally that is the utmost worst sin of sins you could ever do, personally. But if that is what your parents stated in their terminal treatment plan, you have the duty to obey on that plan. So this is all going full circle to where I started once again about the importance of the right players and the importance of that communication. And the parents have to have the courage to have this difficult conversation and be prepared to be questioned, because an advocate's going to ask the questions. Why are you wanting this? Did you not consider X? Did you not consider Y? Let them ask the questions while you're still alive and you can interact with them instead of them having those as unanswered questions echoing in their mind as they're trying to implement your strategy or your plan, especially for your caregiving.
I couldn't agree with you more because I sat down with my daughter and my husband, and I'm of that mind. If all I'm doing is existing, don't prolong it. I don't want to be just existing. So I told them if they didn't do what I wanted, I'd come back and haunt them, but I don't know if I'll be able to carry that out or not.
I hear
But
that one quite often.
I agree with you. So you said they need to go see an estate planning attorney. So how do you find the right one? Because I just had a phone call maybe 3 weeks ago from someone whose mother was actually, she's not being in a nursing home. They don't want to admit it, but that's where she's headed. And they wanted to put the home in the daughter's name. And I said, oh, no, you need to talk to an estate attorney. So I found out last week they talked to one. And so what they're telling me is that he had her put the house in her name. I was appalled, but hey, I did my best. I told them they needed to see one. So what do we need to look for when we're looking for an estate attorney that knows what he or she's doing and will give the best advice?
Okay, so number one is you want to work with an attorney that specializes in estate planning. And by specializes, that doesn't mean one of the 20 things on their work performance menu is estate planning. I mean someone that only does estate, asset preservation, and elder care law, much like our firm. Number two, sit down. Talk to the other professionals that you are engaged with. Talk to your financial advisors. Talk to your insurance. Talk to your tax advisors and see if they have referrals. Also, talk to your friends and family. Find out if they have referrals. And guess what? You're going to interview the attorney. And what do I mean by that? You are going to go in and you're going to sit down and you're going to ask basic questions. And if you don't have good spidey senses when you're interacting with them, follow your spidey senses. I don't care if they're published and they're considered to be the world's best attorney. If you're not vibing with them, don't go with them because you have to have trust. Because when you're going with with an estate planning attorney, you are basically standing naked in front of this person so that they can properly assist you. And if you're not feeling comfortable with that person and you're not having trust in that person, then at that point, there is a high risk that you're not going to get all that you need out of the relationship. Lastly, you want to make sure that you're dealing with an attorney that has been practicing exclusively in this area for what I would say a minimum of 3 to 5 years, because there's a lot of practitioners that do estate planning as their side hustle. What I mean by that is they buy some drafting program and they basically 100% depend on the drafting program to create the end product. And usually these are the people that exhaust out after like 2 or 3 years because they're realizing they can't offer the services they need. So find out how long they have been practicing in the area. And lastly, confirm if they have any professional grievances against them by going to your state-specific bar association, and you can look up in the directory the name of the attorney, and it will list if they have any disciplinary actions against them.
That's a good idea. So let's say that there's a difference between how men take care of parents than women. So what advice do you have for the men who step up and do that?
So one of the things I will say with men is, as an overall gender, they are not ones that want to start facing anything that has mortality in it. It's one of the reasons that very seldom do I have men on their own initiative coming to my firm. Instead, they're being inspired by the women in their lives, their wives, their daughters, their sisters, their girlfriends. They're the ones that are inspiring them to come in because unfortunately there's a lot of men, which doesn't make much sense, but I hear this quite often. The moment we start talking about estate planning, they suddenly believe that the moment they sign something, they're going to die the next day because they're not used to dealing with their own mortality, because you got to remember that they are the protectors and women are the preservers naturally in our, what I'll call our natural state of a gender role. And that's why I think women are far more comfortable, because they're trying to preserve. They're the hunter-gatherers, and they're the ones that are establishing the family roots. Now, when I'm talking to men and they're coming in and they're trying to serve the role as a caregiver, one of the first things that I make sure that they understand is, number one, what it entails, that they don't have to do it alone, that the power of attorney, for example, gives them the power to hire other professionals to help. And I emphasize to them, most importantly, that they have to have patience and grace for the person that they are assisting with, that family member. Because so often a male's relationship, let's say with the mother, they're coming in with a different type of relationship than very often the daughters have. What I mean by that is the daughters have always come in. They're used to having some of these conversations, and they understand the stresses that may happen in certain situations, and the embarrassment may happen with your loved ones as they are finally starting to get to the point they're needing more serious assistance, like incontinence or et cetera. And men will try to defray a lot of stressful situations with humor, which just doesn't work often in that type of a scenario. I also emphasize to my male caregivers to find a caregiver support group. And I say, find one that's not all women, and then find one that's a nice blend and listen to them. Don't be afraid to share your story. Don't be afraid to listen to some of their suggestions. And then lastly, the biggest thing that I tell all my caregivers is make sure you are giving yourself respite. Make sure you're giving yourself rest. Just like with the business, you get 2 weeks of vacation each year. Please make sure you're taking at least 2 weeks away from the person you're caring for. You can be that much more relaxed, that much more recharged, and much stronger of a caregiver. But I would say with men, quite often, they do almost serve the role of the martyr, that to ask for help is a sign of weakness. They believe they should be able to handle it all. And it has to be that daily reminder that it takes a village. So widen your relationships to make your village bigger.
I agree with that. So my next question is, okay, we've been talking about the caregiver. How about the person who's getting the care? What should he or she do to prepare for the day when they're going to need that help?
So do you mind if I share a personal story as I explain
I don't mind at
this?
all.
Okay. So my family is genetically predisposed to vascular dementia. Actually, that was one of my inspirations for getting into this field. As a matter of fact, my grandmother, she passed away from complications of vascular dementia. My mother was her caregiver for the last 4 years of her life. My aunt, vascular dementia. My mother was part of her care group that was caring for her. And then about 9 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with vascular dementia. Her entire life crumbled around her. She was having a kaleidoscope of emotions and experiences coming back to her, because not only did she know what's in store for her, she knew what was in store for myself, my sister, my father as caregivers, because she had served the role as caregiver. And one of the things I can say, when she felt she was losing control, that she was being betrayed by her mind and body because of this diagnosis, I was able to give her that independence and that control through actively working on her estate planning strategy with her. And one of the things I want people to realize when I say estate planning, it's not all after you die. A proper estate planning strategy is dealing with if you live perfectly and you have the great life and a great death where literally you just had dinner with best friends, you lay down and you're gone, or the ones that have more of a longer transition from healthy to unhealthy to passing. But what I will say is working with my mom as a child, loved one, family one, and not as an attorney sitting on that side of the table with her, I definitely got to see how she felt control coming back into her life, because she was stating how things were going to happen on her terms, that this disease was not going to control her to the very end. Though today, like I may have mentioned My mom, at this point, she's in advanced stages. She hasn't recognized me for 2 years. She's been nonverbal for about 8 months now. She's on hospice 24/7 in a skilled nursing facility in Virginia. But before she got to that state, and when she got that diagnosis, we made sure to start her estate planning strategy. And the comfort, the relief, the control that she felt by naming out the players, that in and of itself made me realize how we truly are attorneys and counselors at law, because that control I was not able to, but the attorney that she used in Virginia was able to give her was worth thousands of dollars of any type of psychological counseling they could have ever done, because she was tangibly able to state how she wanted things to happen on her terms. And this is also where we had those difficult conversations. We had the conversations of, okay, Mom, you're now in a terminal condition that's defined as X, Y, and Z. What do you want us to do? And I remember my mom talking to me, and all she kept saying is, I don't want to put you in a position where I give you an instruction that you're not going to have the strength to do. And of course, my response back is, Mom, give me that instruction, because through your instruction, I'm going to find the strength I need to have to honor you. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's my experience with my mom when she got diagnosed, and how we did focus on her plan. And not only did it give the proper support for my father, my sister, and I to advocate for her, but the therapeutic results that came for her when she felt her life was most vulnerable was astounding.
Now, I know you also work with veterans. Do you have any special advice for veterans?
I certainly do. So one of the big things that I want veterans to realize is y'all have made a sacrifice for the service that you've done for our nation. And some of the most selfless people I've ever met are veterans. What I hear quite often is start talking to people about these strategies and these opportunities to different plans. I hear this quite often from veterans. I'm doing okay. Some of my brothers and sisters in arms are worse off than me. I don't want to take this plan that's going to take away from them. And I emphasize to them, well, actually, you're not taking anything away from anyone by participating in one of these 2 programs I'm going to talk about really quick, because you've already done the sacrifice, and now you're able to reap the reward. It's not as though this reward only has a limited allowance of participation. So let's talk first about the actual veteran themselves. Now, if you're a veteran, whether you served during a wartime period or not, one of the things you need to realize is the power of what's called VA-CCN, the Community Care Network with VA. And through VA-CCN, you can get a referral from a VA doctor to assist with at-home care that will be covered 100% by the VA. Now, what's the hardest part of this process? The hardest part of this process is to schedule that appointment with the VA doctor to get the referral. But when you have the referral, from the time of referral to the time that you have care coming in for those approved numbers of hours, is usually about 2 weeks. So I work a lot with some of my clients that are veterans that are now needing the point of care. Let me rephrase this. They're needing care, but their caregiver needs relief. So I work with them to try to get onto VA-CCN, working with a dear partner of mine here in the Metro Atlanta area by the name of Jeff Whitehouse, who owns his own caregiving company that is approved by the VA to receive a referral to provide out caregivers. So that's the first thing I want people to realize is if you are the veteran and you need some assistance in home, that's an opportunity. Now, are they going to give an astronomical number of hours? No. They're probably going to give somewhere between 10 or 12 hours a week. But that's 10 or 12 hours of respite for your caregiver. That is going to be such a godsend. Now, the second program I want to emphasize that our veterans have an opportunity for is what's called VA Aid and Attendance. Now, aid and attendance is different in 2 aspects than what we just talked about with VA-CCN. VA-CCN is going to apply for any veteran, regardless of wartime period or not, and it's limited only to the veteran. Now, VA Aid and Attendance, this one is focusing on whether or not you are a wartime era veteran. And to be a wartime era veteran, you have to have served at least one day during certain recognized wartime periods, whether it be Korea, Vietnam in country, Vietnam anywhere else, Persian Gulf, and etc. So if you served during that wartime, a minimum of, I believe it's 90 days outside of boot camp, and you're discharged for any reason other than dishonorable, you meet the prerequisite number 1, which is the military service requirement. Okay? Number 2 is the need for the health assistance. And you have to need assistance at least 2 of the 7 recognized daily living activities. And by assistance, I don't mean replacement of the ability to perform. Assistance in bathing, for example, is not going to be they have to sponge bathe you. That could mean somebody has to stand outside of the shower because you're a fall risk. Toileting, that doesn't mean that you have to be incontinent wearing adult diapers. That could mean that you need somebody to brace you to sit down on the toilet or to get up. Eating, that doesn't mean that somebody has to feed you. It could mean that you have to have food specially prepared. For example, when my mother, before she got to the point she couldn't feed herself, she still met this because they had to specially prepare her food so that it was in very, very small bite-sized pieces, for example. And then the third requirement is looking at financial, and this is where very often working with an attorney, and they need to be an accredited attorney by the VA. They can help out with the strategy to make sure you meet that financial requirement. So you see, this was limited to wartime veterans, but there's a beauty with this one. This same opportunity goes to the widows or widowers of wartime veterans. So this is a beautiful gift that your veteran spouse that may have predeceased you has now given you. And I encourage you, if you're not very familiar with these opportunities and you yourself are either a veteran or you yourself are the widow or widower of a wartime veteran, sit down, talk to an estate planning attorney that has experience in VA planning. Talk to them more about it. Learn more about it. Because knowledge is power. I'm a child of the 70s. Schoolhouse rocks all the way. And I think that's just really important because once again, our veterans have sacrificed so much for us to have what we have today in the United States that we need to continue to honor them. And they need to realize these services are not taking away from anyone. They earned them based upon their service.
Is there any other advice you would like to give to anyone?
Well, one of the other things that I emphasize to people, and this is another misconception a lot of people have, especially when we start talking about caregiving, because here's the thing, we are living longer today than we ever have. And as we are living longer, the long-term care industry is booming because as we live longer, our bodies weren't meant to be alive for 90, 100 years or et cetera. So you start having all of these ailments. And what you need to realize is there are opportunities a lot of people believe that they don't have, that they can realize they have opportunity for with just a simple conversation with a skilled attorney, such as Medicaid planning. So often I hear from people, I will never qualify for Medicaid. And my response back, unless you're already dead, you can strategically become qualified for Medicaid. You just got to make sure that you're working with an elder care attorney that specializes in Medicaid qualification strategy. And the saddest one that I hear quite often, and then I get this almost like 1,000,000-pound weight off of people's shoulders, is a lot of married couples believe they have to go through a Medicaid divorce to qualify. Here's my comment. Medicaid rules are different per state. And I myself, I'm only licensed in Michigan and Georgia, so I can only speak in regards to those 2 states. Well, what I can tell you is specifically here in Georgia, being married, that is the best state you could ever be for strategic Medicaid planning. Because here in Georgia, we can preserve most, if not all, of the assets of the marital couple and get the ailing spouse onto Medicaid. And other states have different rules because Medicaid, it is a federal program that's ran by the individual states. That's why you want to sit down and you want to talk to an attorney. And if all of a sudden you've got mom that's needing the help and you're trying to decide, do we keep mom in Maryland or do we bring mom to Georgia? Talk to a Maryland attorney, talk to a Georgia attorney. If you're going to try to get them on Medicaid, figure out which one is more opportune for it. So I do want people to realize that Medicaid is an opportunity and it is not a lost opportunity just because you have assets. Now, there's going to be strategy we're going to have to do, but don't believe the wives' tale that you'll never qualify for Medicaid, just like never believe the wives' tale that you have to go broke to get any type of help if you're going into a nursing home.
Good advice. I want to thank you for being my guest today. What I really like is that you've given us a lot of information that most people probably don't even know about. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank our listeners for listening. And this has been the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your guest, me, Diane Robinson. And my guest today was Shannon Pawley. And for more information on Shannon and the work she does, visit her website at elderlawgeorgia.com. We'll also put the link in the show notes for you too. So Shannon, again, thank you for joining me. I have really enjoyed talking to you today.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and have a great day.
You too.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.